And so we're officially official, Sammy. We had to wait till today. What was it, 4:00 Eastern? Now we can meet. Now I always love this. Like, we've been spending the last 3 days on the NFL Network talking about all these deals. We knew a lot about the trades and other things that happened. As I'm tweeting it out, Sammy, don't worry. I tweeted it out. We're good. We have to wait, and then obviously, then today's like, oh, now we're doing it. I guess some of the things could have fallen through. I think back to Larry Ogunjobi years ago, where you're like, oh yeah, like we were the first team out of the gate. Like, hey, we signed this guy. You're like, nope, we can't do it because he didn't pass his physical or whatever it was. But now it's officially official, and we can look at this team and start to see the way that this is coming together, and starting to see the Ben Johnson effect. And I know that I've been sitting here on the NFL Network and on my social media already proclaiming us the offseason champions, third consecutive season. Honestly, I'm fine with it. I know that the Packer fans are trying to deride us or do whatever. Like, oh, you guys always win the offseason. Like, yeah, we do. Yeah, we haven't won anything in quite some time in a real tangible sense. Not since the 2018 season when we won the NFC North. So yeah, I'm going to take these small victories. I'm not going to sit here and not enjoy it. And I know that there's a lot of people, and rightfully so, who are going to sit there and be like, I understand what you're saying, where you're like, we've been down this road. We've been off-season champs before. If you don't think that this feels different, if you can't sense the work or what's been going on in Chicago over the last couple of months, then I don't know that we'll ever. Then at this point, you're just waiting. You're just playing it safe. You're not going to get hurt. You're Ted Mosby, not dating anybody right now. And you just want to sit there and wait, and it's fine. And I think that it's well within your right to do it. But you know what? We're going to sit here today and celebrate some of the things that have been happening with the Chicago Bears. So, Sammy, let's start the show.
Turn up your volume. Because you're about to listen to The Sick Podcast with Adam Ray.
It's Hester trying to work it back to the middle. Gets past the first wave, and here he goes. It's Hester inside the 30. Hester's going to take it all the way for a touchdown. And no flag, 92 yards.
The sickest Chicago Bears and fantasy football podcast. Sports entertainment like no other. It's going to be sick.
It's Wednesday night. You know what that means? That it's time for Take It to the Rank, a great night of sports and entertainment. Not only do we have Take It to the Ranks coming up in about an hour and a half, the Tape Never Lies Network will be here. Draft Dr. Phil, him and Shane have been breaking down some of the newest signees for the Chicago Bears and showing us why they're going to come in here and make a huge impact. When you start talking about Dio Odango, people are like, he had 4 sacks. You know what? He was playing defensive tackle last year. But he's going to switch to defensive end. He's going to be a monster for us. So we have that coming up tonight. AEW is just coming off a successful pay-per-view. So that's going to be on tonight. The challenge is, did you see last week? Adam and Steve didn't have to go into the arena down to the sin. Adam and Steve, do you feel like Gwen Stefani looks at Adam and is like, I don't like those two? But in any event, it doesn't matter. We're here to talk about the Chicago Bears. And to do that, we go to our brother from CHGO, a guy that I hung up on yesterday from the pitch over at Harborview Elementary School here in Southern California. You caught me at the wrong time, Greg. I'm so sorry, but I hope you will forgive me. I'm sorry to hang up on you yesterday.
No, I know you have championships to win, and you take your soccer coaching very seriously. So no offense taken. We've got a lot going on, and so but we know how hard you work for those very talented young ladies that you represent.
Well, thank you very much. I do appreciate that. Yeah, we're doing a great job. A great week of training so far, and it's been a lot of fun, and also a great week for the Chicago Bears.
Yep.
Before we go into some of the clips of some of the things that we saw today, I mentioned this on Monday because Sunday night I did fall for the Falcons posting the like, hey, we signed Bruce Matthews, or not Bruce Matthews, but Matthews, Jake Matthews. And I'm like, oh, son of a gun. And I thought the Drew Dahlman was not going to be ours.
Sure.
And turns out that wasn't the case. Now that we've had a couple of days, and I'm going to include the trades in here too. What has been your favorite move so far for the Chicago Bears?
Ooh, that's a tough one. That's a tough one. I would say Drew Dahlman. I mean, I think Joe Tooney is the easy answer because he brings this championship pedigree. He's been to 4 Super Bowls, or he's been to 6 Super Bowls, won 4. He's made the playoffs every year his career but one. He's blocked for Tom Brady and Patrick Mahomes, and now he gets to come in here with all of that experience and leadership and come here. We talked about that last week with Draft Dr. Phil.
Yeah.
But for me, going into this offseason and knowing what the needs of the Bears were, which were aplenty, I always kind of said center position was number 1 for me.
Yeah.
And to go out and get Drew Dahlman, who's 26 years old, after everything we've been through, whether it be Sam Mustipher or Lucas Patrick and then Coleman Shelton last year, you heard Grady Jarrett talk about it today at House Hall, and I know we'll get into it, but he talked about, what he brings to the table. And I just think they needed a steady force right there in the middle. It all, it's a trickle down effect from there, from left to right. He connects it all. He connects from the right side of the line to the left side of the line to the quarterback, that quarterback center connection. And I feel like, as I said last week, and I've said a few times this week on CHGO Bears, one of the biggest hurdles that Caleb Williams had to try to overcome this year and had a tough time with was at the line of scrimmage, identifying the hot, identifying the blitz, identifying the fronts and the coverages, and trying to align up how, the blocking, responsibilities and whether they're going to run outside zone or inside zone, if they're going to run right, or if they're going to run left, motioning a guy on the right side or the left side of the line. Where are these guys lined up? All these different plays. And I just think at certain points of the year, it became very overwhelming for Caleb. And so for a guy like Drew Dahlman to come in here and try to help execute a first-year offense with Ben Johnson, he clearly wanted veterans in that room. So he knew that not just passing the ball and protecting the quarterback, but also running the football. There's just so many nuances to the game that fans like me, or a lot of fans like me, that only really understand it on its surface level, the details, to have these veterans in here, and it starts at the center position. So I'm going Drew Dahlman.
No, that was a great signing. And I made the analogy earlier this week. It was kind of like when thinking that we had lost Drew Dahlman, it was kind of like that scene in Friends when Phoebe tells Rachel that she's not pregnant, and then Rachel gets sad, and she's like, oh, and then she's like, no, I'm just kidding. You actually are pregnant. And it let you know how much, it let me in that moment know how much I wanted Drew Dahlman to be a part of this team, because like you, I really feel like the center position is everything. And for the Bears to be successful, the last time the Bears got to the Super Bowl, they had one of the best centers. And it's no coincidence to me. And I think of a lot of great dynasties or a lot of great teams, the center position is so clutch and it's so underrated. And so for the Bears to go out there and get that done, and honestly, I don't think it was much of an overpay. I feel like it was a competitive contract. It's the guy that we wanted. It's the guy who's been identified as the top center. So I'm good with that. I will, though, say one quick thing. I love Drew Dahlman. Drew Dahlman might not even be my favorite former Packer, or excuse me, my favorite former Falcon, who has joined the Chicago Bears this week, because Grady Jarrett apparently really doesn't like Jordan Love. And that clip started going around, and of course he was going to be asked about it today. And Sammy, if I'm not mistaken, you did cut that clip for us. Let's take a listen to that right now.
Talking with Coach, I saw a mic'd up clip with you. I was playing the Packers, and you passionately told Jordan Love to pipe down. Was
Go ahead, finish. What else I say?
I can't. You know what I mean? I'm glad you know what I'm talking about, though. Was that just a regular football interaction, or was that something just a little bit more?
Man, you know, when you playing ball, man, you know, doing this, you know, being professional and being able to talk and communicate with people is something. But when you playing ball, you cross some lines, you got to be able to go in that dark place, you know. And sometimes what happened in that dark place, you know, it get a little crazy. You know what I'm saying? And just being a competitor. And like I talked about mic'd up with some of the new media team here, and I was like, yeah, I know I got some crazy ones. And that was released. So the stuff that's not released got to be super crazy. But you got to have that dog in you. You know what I'm saying? Obviously, Jordan Love is a good quarterback. But my thing is, so if you already can't hit the quarterback so many different ways. See, first of all, I chased him down the field over 50 yards. I went and caught him, so I got that speed on me too. And that was 2 years ago, so I'm only getting faster. So then to walk away from me talking mess, I mean, what we doing? We ain't, you know what I'm saying? But I'm excited to get to go against him 2 times a year now, and just try to help this organization get some wins over that other team.
It's interesting because that gives a little glimpse and players and their feelings on Jordan Love. And again, it's not like the Falcons and Packers have this rivalry. Right. He was really going after him. I kind of like that energy from Grady Jarrett.
Who did he remind you of immediately?
Tommy Harris.
I'm going to go Akeem Hicks.
Oh, yeah.
The way he came in, just that booming personality. He talked about, hey, it's going to be a competitive training camp. We're going to bring a different type of energy. He talked about at one time, I want to share my experience and my hunger for greatness. And those who want to have that kind of greatness, I want to be there for them. Like, man, that's the kind of leadership that Akeem Hicks carried on this team, and something this team has been sorely missing. Something I've been talking about all season, especially from the halfway point on when things started to go downhill. This team lacked leadership, and this guy has it in droves. You can feel it. And you say, well, hey, he's got to, produce on the field too, of course. But I think his resume and his tape speaks for itself in that regard. So him to come out here and to have this, aura about him here today, obviously it's got to translate into the locker room, but I think it will. I think you're going to have a coaching staff that'll empower a guy like that. And so I'm excited. Ben Johnson even said at one point, because it's also about like, well, what's it like for the guys that have to go up against him? And Ben Johnson said, well, when you come out of the game against, Grady Jarrett, you're sore because you played against him. And so just a relentless type of player. And his personality, obviously, he had a little dash of humor in there, but then he would weave in and out of the seriousness of which he approaches the game. He talked about at one point something Cole Kmet said during the season, like, it's about what you do when no one's watching, right? And so, there's just a leadership aspect for me that reminded me a lot of Akeem Hicks, and I'm excited for him to implement that into the 2025 Bears.
No, that was a better one. I'm embarrassed that I didn't think of it that one, because Akeem Hicks, he was one of those guys, like you said, who was a true leader in the clubhouse. I remember Akeem Hicks actually pulling me aside one time to say, like, hey, keep up the good work. Because I think it was after Trevathan, when he hit was it Devontae Adams? Like, who did he blow up that one time against the Packers? And I remember, because I went on the network, and of course I'm going to be the biased guy on the network, and I'm like, hey, the guy's fighting for extra yards. He leans his head down, and Danny just kind of runs into him. Like, like that's a football play. The Bears appreciated me saying that. Nobody else in the league thought that was good. And I remember Hicks telling me, Keem's like, hey, man, he's like, thanks, dude. Like, we appreciate you having us. And I want to see that kind of attitude again. And I want to see players like really getting after it. And I mean, as great as the Bears were playing defensively for like the last, I don't know, before the season fell off the edge this year, they had put together a decent, 2023. They played well for the first couple of weeks of 2024, but they didn't quite have the swagger of those teams like back in the day. Like, you could go back and you're talking about Akeem Hicks and Tommy Harris, AJ Brown, or Lance Briggs, and all those guys. Like, they didn't quite have that swagger, even though they were playing well. I would like to see us get back to it. And Jaquan Brisker is kind of Jaquan Brisker really fits into that kind of stuff too, where he'll get after. I mean, I know personally that he doesn't care for the Packers as well. So that's a lot of good stuff. So Grady Jarrett came in there and did a great job.
Right, and you had Jalen Johnson giving the one-fingered salute, against the Packers in the last week of the season. Now you got Grady Jarrett, having some words for Jordan Love in a mic'd up moment, and said, "Well, you should have heard what wasn't mic'd up." So that was great.
Right.
I think just putting a wrap or a bow on some of this Grady Jarrett thought, but and I am sure we'll talk about Dio Odango from Indianapolis as well. But I hear a lot of Bears fans say, "Well, well, why are these guys available? Good teams or teams don't let good players go. Well, that's not always the case. It's not a one size fits all narrative. I mean, and as I just mentioned, a guy like Akeem Hicks came over to the Bears, had a great career here. You look at Andrew Billings, another defensive lineman that came over here, got a well-deserved contract extension, has played great with us, and has been a good leader. Maybe not one of the more outspoken Grady Jarrett types. You rewind back to yesteryear. Look at Ted Washington and Keith Traylor. I know that's a long time ago, but those were two defensive tackles that came in here, and their reputation spoke for itself. And maybe they were on the back ends of their career, but they paid dividends in the development of Brian Urlacher and Lance Briggs. Go ask what those guys were like when they first showed up in the locker room. Lance Briggs has told a great story about, when they were doing their rookie, hazing, when they have to talk in front of the whole team and they tried to be funny, and Ted Washington, Keith Traylor weren't having it. Like, they're like, all right, sit down, young buck, and so now you have this guy in Grady Jarrett coming in here and showing like, hey, I still got a lot left in the tank. I'm going to be physical. I'm going to be violent. I'm going to get after Jordan Love, and I'm going to bring everyone along with me that wants to strive for greatness. Sign me up, man. Like I tweeted it out as soon as we heard it. I was like, well, it took about 5 seconds for Grady Jarrett to probably be my favorite player on the team right now. Like
favorite Bear of all time. No, I'm just kidding.
But seriously, I mean, look at how much Akeem Hicks ingratiated himself with the fan base right away, and when you went to training camp, him and Kyle Long and the battles they'd have, you knew that like the season was ready to start as soon as those two guys started fighting with each other at Bourbonnais. And so let's hope that they bring in that kind of attitude and intensity to practice. Because as we've learned with any great team, any teams that win championships and go to the playoffs consistently, they treat training camp as if it's the regular season. Then the regular season gets treated as if it's the playoffs. And so that's the kind of mentality this team needs. And to have that, you need leaders like Grady Jarrett.
Yeah, and I know a quick aside, the Bourbonnais, I know you want to go back to that too. That little small town, that small town feel of like having a training camp somewhere. Now that everybody does it at their facilities now. I think the Cowboy, I guess that's not true because the Raiders come down to Costa Mesa. The Cowboys go up to Oxnard. The Rams go down to UC Irvine for whatever reason. But yeah, it would be cool to go back and have a little place where people are, away. They're not driving to work every day. Like they're staying there and being a part of it. Maybe that'll be the next thing that Ben Johnson is can tackle on his to-do list. I do want to talk about this because this was, you and I on different platforms came to the same conclusion after the first couple of days of free agency, because we've been saying like, hey, like when we've been talking about Ashton Genty, for instance, we're like, well, if the Bears sign 2 guards and a center and a defensive end and a D tackle, then we can start talking about perhaps taking a running back at number 10. And that's exactly what the Bears did. It seems like it's opened up the floor. Before I get your thoughts, Greg, why don't we listen to Ben Johnson talking about, or was it Ryan Poles talking about taking the best player available?
A common theme to the offensive linemen that you guys wanted and wound up landing.
Yeah, we want some tough, some gritty, some dirty individuals, and we feel pretty good about the 2 guys we got. Smart is a word that comes to mind, particularly with the interior players. We need guys that we love to have some versatility to our scheme, some multiplicity, if you will. And so we got a couple guys in the building now that we feel strongly can handle a variety of different concepts and schemes that we might want to employ each and every week. Beyond that, I mean, their play speaks for themselves just in terms of what the tape says. The character, the integrity, it's top notch. I can speak firsthand with Jonah, and Ryan can speak firsthand with Joe. I'm really, really excited to get these guys in the room, combined with the coaches that we've already put together for that room. I feel really good about the style of play we'll have this year.
Yeah, what do you think about the style of play? Because I think Jonas Jackson was one that a lot of people were kind of apprehensive about, perhaps lukewarm, but listening to Ben Johnson talking about him today, feels like this is going to be a really good fit for him.
Yeah, I mean, certainly. I mean, Jonah Jackson even at one point said, my best ball was under Ben Johnson because he plays to our strengths. So that when you ask what kind of ball they're going to play under Ben Johnson here in Chicago, playing to their strengths, I think sort of maybe opens the door to something different than what we saw in Detroit. I mean, and Ben alluded to this in his opening presser where he said, this isn't going to be the Lions offense. This will be the Bears offense. So if that's the case, well, if you look at their center, Drew Dahlman, he's more of an outside zone type of center. He's a guy that likes to get out in space, get to the second level, make his blocks and open up that hole for your running back to pop a big one, right? And then your left guard, Joe Tunney, same thing. All teams play a myriad of different running styles, like good coaches, right? And I think that's something we've heard from Ben Johnson, that stylistically going into each game, he's going to go with, kind of a chameleon look. You're not always going to get the same thing from Ben Johnson. That's why they call him the mad professor, right? Or that might end up being his nickname here in Chicago, if he can show that that's who he is. That being said, does seem like the Bears were already running a lot of outside zone stuff with Chris Morgan and the offensive line that they were trying to implement. You still have Darnell Wright. You still have Braxton Jones, who, again, two guys that I think when you get them on the move, when you got them pulling, when you got them doing certain things to get them in space, do well. And then you center and your left guard are used to those things. In Detroit, they were running more of a gap run scheme. And here in Chicago, maybe that's going to be the different type of look that they do here in Chicago, that maybe you'll see some more outside zone. But ultimately, I do think that Ben Johnson is creative enough to play to the player's strengths, but understand what the defense's weaknesses are as well.
Yeah, and when you talk about the construction of the offensive line and everything like that, it does, again, going back to the point of opening up the draft board to a wide variety of possibilities. Ryan Poles talked about that today. So, Sammy, can we listen to what Ryan Poles was saying about drafting the best players?
And is this what you've been able to do so far open up what you can do in the draft? Are you looking at it that way?
Yeah, this really opens the whole board for us. So we're going to be able to sit back and kind of look and say what's the best thing to do for the Chicago Bears and who's the best player that can impact. So we got some tough decisions and a lot of film to watch between now and the draft.
Yeah, I guess it kind of makes his job a little bit more difficult because last season he wasn't even taking interviews with Jaden Daniels. He already knew he was taking Caleb Williams, and that's not a shot or anything, but it's like now everything's in play.
Right.
What is your gut feel? Like, what do you think? Like, where do you think the Bears are going with number 10? I mean, like, we don't have we don't know. Like, by the way, was that Carm who asked that question?
That was Carm. Carm had an excellent question. Hogue had a really good question later to someone else. I'd have to try to figure out which one it was, but they both had a great day at House Hall. Shout out to them. But that was a great question from Carm to, get Poles to say that the board is wide open. Of course, I think Ryan Poles would also want the rest of the NFL to think that too. He's not going to be like, well, we got one guy in mind, you're not,
we're drafting Will Johnson.
Yeah. So at the same time, it is true. Like you said earlier in the show, like fans weren't, just vehemently against Ashton Jeanty. You guys clipped something from me saying that I would not take that off the table. I'll be the idiot that doesn't take that off the table until it needs to be. And people just if you go look at those comments, people lost their mind to it. Now, if you tweet about the Bears,
they also didn't like your hat.
Right. Yes. Because I wear my hat backwards or something. I don't know. Whatever. This is what I do. But all I'll say is now if you clip something about pro Ashton Jeanty drafting, you get nothing but, flowers thrown at you because that's what Bears fans are starting to get closer to gravitating towards. So it's interesting. I'm still more, let's go. Let's leave no stone unturned. Never let this happen again. Make sure your offensive line room is a strength for years to come. And if not, then I'm looking at defensive line because I'm going trenches. I've been saying it for a couple weeks now. We are getting trench drunk this offseason, and they've started free agency getting trench drunk, and I want them to continue to get trench drunk in the draft in the first and second rounds. Let's go all in. You see what the mark of the championships teams are, and that is in the trenches on the offensive line and the defensive line. And the Bears have off to a great start here, but they can finish the job here at the NFL draft.
Let's say at number 10, we have our choice between Mason Graham, Will Campbell, or whoever the best offensive lineman is to you, Ashton Genty, or Tyler Warren. Which one of those 4 guys would you want to go after?
I mean, it is honestly that stressful, that hard. Mason Graham, Will Campbell, Ashton Genty, and Tyler Warren are all there at 10.
It seems impossible. I've been trying to do this. Like 3 quarterbacks would have to go. Like it's weird. Like some weird stuff would have to happen.
It's not impossible for one.
Well, nothing is impossible.
It's not, but it isn't. There is a realistic scenario that does happen. It's not even just something that's like meatball creation, which we may or may not have been known to do here from time to time. But I don't know. For me, man, I'd go Will Campbell. As enticing as Mason Graham is, and maybe I'm wrong here, and I'll admit, because 2 weeks ago I would have said Mason Graham.
Yeah,
but the more I look at it with Will Campbell or the offensive line in general, you have an opportunity there with Will Campbell. People writing him off as a left tackle, I think, are getting ahead of themselves. Let's see what Ryan Poles and Ben Johnson think about the prospects of Will Campbell eventually being a left tackle. And regardless, if he ends up being an all-pro guard for the rest of his career, like a guy like Joe Thuney, you bring him into the fold here. Braxton Jones is recovering from injury. You let them compete for that left tackle spot. Jonah Jackson right now is on a 1-year, $18 million deal. Until they give a contract extension to Joe Thuney, which as of right now, which is all I can live in, they haven't given him a contract extension. I expect them to. I think they should. But right now they don't. So their guards right now aren't long-term as it stands. And if everything goes right, great. Let Jonah Jackson and Joe Thuney be your guards for the next 3 years. But then you still have to figure out what you're doing with Braxton Jones at left tackle. So I think it's a good problem to have, but let's make it a great problem to have. You draft Will Campbell in here. Let it figure itself out. May the best man win. And if Will Campbell ends up taking that job, so be it. And then you've also set yourself up for next year where you have a tough decision to make on how Braxton Jones does and what you're going to do with him in free agency, because you've seen what some of these left tackles are getting to stick with some of their teams. So like that's kind of where my headspace is at. But man, Mason Graham is certainly, you could make the same case the same way around for him, because your defensive tackles are Andrew Billings and Grady Jarrett, who are veterans, right? So
yeah,
you need a guy in waiting for them, and you also need game wreckers, right? So I don't know, man. Not like you broke my brain asking me that question. So thank you.
Thank you. Oh no, you always want to break your the brain of the person you're interviewing, apparently. But I look at it this way, and I know that people can look at this last season with Roma Dunze and speculate. Well, Ryan Poles would favor a playmaker, so to speak, with somebody like Ashton Genty or Tyler Warren, because hey, look at what they did with Roma Dunze. But I think the drafting of Roma Dunze leads me to believe that he's going offensive lineman, because remember last season when they drafted Roma Dunze, they had Keenan Allen. So they could have easily gone into last year and been like, listen, we're set. We got DJ Moore and we got Keenan Allen. We don't need to go draft another wide receiver.
Sure.
Similarly, people are now assuming, because you trade for Thuney, you trade for Jackson, they'd like, well, they're not going to go offensive line, whereas actually, it makes the most sense because you're not desperate for offensive linemen. And we saw what it did to the Giants last year, where a couple of these teams that were like, well, they're not taking Roma Dunze. And then all of a sudden they take Roma Dunze, and it kind of shocks everybody. So everything being on the table for me, I truly believe in my heart that they're going to end up going with the offensive lineman, the highest rated offensive lineman that they have on the board. Not because it's a need, but I think it'll just end up being their highest player. And I also truly kind of believe that Ashton Genty is going to be gone before we get an opportunity to take him at number 10, whether it's the Cowboys moving up, perhaps swapping picks with the Raiders at number 6, something like that. Although I would really love Ashton Genty. I do know that when all the Ashton Genty cards are released, regardless of his team, I'm going to be buying them. And the place to buy them is Windy City Sports Cards, because at Windy City Sports Cards, we specialize in buying and selling all things related to Chicago sports. Whether you are a diehard fan of the Bears, Bulls, Cubs, White Sox, Blackhawks, Sky, or Fire, we have got you covered with an extensive selection of sports memorabilia and collectibles. And in addition to our Chicago focus items, they offer a wide variety of items and memorabilia from the world of sports and entertainment. If you did not already get rid of your Garrett Cole cards, go ahead and do that. I will say this, my alma mater, Corona High School, not Cal State Fullerton, Corona High School has 2 players this year who could be drafted in the top 5. And I think I'm going to get both. I'm going to get with Mike, and I'm like, I got to get their cards. I kind of hope the Angels draft one of them, although I think the Angels will draft a college-ready guy who's going to play immediately. But it's like, God, I would love to draft, because Corona is the hometown of Anaheim and Corona. They're border cities, and it would be nice to have that. But I think we end up going with the offensive lineman, and I think it's a good problem to have, and I think that it's probably going to be the smart way to do business.
Well, and there's no one right answer. And this is the thing I was trying to plead with Bears fans yesterday, is I was like starting to get a sense that people are starting to get like aggressive in their pleading of their case of what the right move is at 10. And I'm like, look, guys, like this is not last year where it's like keep Fields, trade for the Hall, draft Caleb, let go of Fields. Like, and that created just such a divisiveness between the fans and such a tension and nastiness at times when we were debating the topic. I don't really think that this year's debate on what the Bears should do in the draft calls for that kind of emotion. The Bears fans should be in a great mood. The Bears are in a great spot. Eric Bochanan says it in the chat. Poles has a very good opportunity to field a veteran O-line and D-line while being able to draft eventual replacements in this year's draft early. And I agree with that. How many picks do you have in the first 72 or whatever, 75 picks, right?
Yeah.
You've got a first round pick, 2 second round picks, a third round pick. So however you want to slice it, get your offensive lineman, get your defensive lineman, maybe get 2 of one of the trenches, get a running back. And you have a chance to really bolster this roster with, you brought in the veterans here in free agency on short-term deals. Yeah. Drew Dahlman, Jonah Jackson, Joe Tooney, Dio Odango. Everybody's going to love saying that name. And then, of course, Grady Jarrett. But none of them they're all like 3-year deals. Then you can bring in draft guys that can come behind them, reload again next year in the draft. This is a good recipe. Obviously, everybody's got to hit and play well, and it doesn't always work that way. But you're opening up your margin of error, I feel like, as well, just by creating the depth on your roster. You saw how much this team fell off the map as soon as Andrew Billings got hurt last year. So to your point, about bringing in Grady Jarrett and maybe drafting a guy like Mason Graham, well, if one of those D tackles goes down, and that the unfortunate inevitability about football, well, now you got guys behind them as opposed to last year where you probably had the thinnest defensive tackle, group in the entire NFL. You probably had the thinnest interior offensive lineman in the NFL. Now you have a chance to have that not be the case this year.
Yeah, when we were on CHGO a couple of weeks ago and we were going over our wish list and everything like that, my whole list was like, keep stockpiling offensive linemen and keep trying to get like more linemen, get as many as possible, because again, it's inevitable that you're going to need somebody. Like, we're not going through the season. You don't play a 17 game, soon to be 18 game schedule without people getting injured. So the more that you can get, the better. I do think what's going to happen is I think the world's gonna. I have this doomsday scenario. It's very similar to the Jalen Carter thing, where like Genty falls to 10, and then we trade with the Cowboys or somebody to let them come up and take Genty, and we go back a couple of picks and take a lineman or something like that, and then people are going to lose their minds. Because I know our friend EJ's out. EJ has been on top of this for like he's been a Genty guy since day one, and it's great. And like you said, there's no wrong answers. I don't want people to be upset by this. It's all a matter of philosophy, and I think for you and I, we're very similar in our approach here. Like, let's just get the line going, and if we can accumulate more picks, if we can try to get back a third round pick that we're lacking this season. Go out there and get just drop a couple of spots, which is always easier said than done. Drop a couple of spots, pick up some additional draft capital, and then attack it that way. That is what I would like to do. But I think a big thing too is that people just want now to come play for the Bears, because we know Ashton Genty has been photographed hanging out with Caleb Williams. We've also started to hear from some of the guys who are joining the team how much they wanted to play for Chicago.
Right.
So, Sammy, if we can we go back to Grady and have him talking about choosing the Chicago Bears?
New chapter of my life. I'm so happy to be here in a great city like Chicago, an organization who has a history of just being, just dominant defense, legendary players, Hall of Famers. I'm watching from afar, be able to walk in the building that's associated with Walter Payton. I've been a two-time Walter Payton Man of the Year award nominee. I've met his family a couple of times. So the pride that I have in this place, I didn't even know it really lived into me until I walked into the building. You know what I'm saying? And so I'm just so fired up. Sorry, y'all.
There is something magical about walking in to the facility at Hallis Hall and seeing the great homage to all the legends of not only the Chicago Bears, but of football in general, and how much the Bears have meant to the history of football. Like it really is a testament to the sport. And so for Grady Jarrett to go out there and talk about that. Talking about Jordan Love is fun, but I think that one really hits home for me.
Yeah, it's cool, right? It's cool when your players you bring in are excited to be here on the team. Like, I wish I'd have had a say in this, or something like that.
Yeah.
Like, no, they're fired up. I mean, you even heard from Joe Tooney, who's won Super Bowls with the greatest to ever do it. He was asked about, his excitement on joining the Bears, and he said there's such an intent and a purpose to win, and that makes me excited. So I think that's the other aspect of why I think for us as fans, if you're trying to win the press conference championship, and we've been through a lot of these where you can get overhyped, and that's fine. Let's just have some fun with it. We all understand that they have to get it done on the field. But at the same time, these guys have come from organizations where they've won games. They've had long tenured, careers where they've played really well. And so I think ultimately at this point in their careers as veterans, they just want to win. So for them to have that kind of energy and excitement, their first day at Hallis Hall, talking with the media, knowing that they're delivering their message to the fans, they know what they're doing. They're not rookies. They've been around the block. And so I do feel like part of that excitement is because they do believe in what the vision is happening here in Hallis Hall. And, so many times, like, fans or media or whoever in fantasy football, this, Adam, everybody values the skill guys and who's going to score the touchdowns and the glitz and the glamour and who's the Ferraris, but who are the nuts and bolts? Who are the meat and potatoes? Do they get celebrated the same way? Are they valued the same way by the organization? Well, clearly, now that Ben Johnson has arrived at Hallis Hall, they clearly value the trenches. And so when you bring trenches guys in here, that excites them that they feel that value from the front office.
Yeah, it's one of the things that over the last couple of days on the NFL Network, I've been charged with, talking about fantasy impact and all that stuff, which it was surprising today too. They wanted me to come in at 7 a.m. today. What was that? What was that note, Sammy? You were You were throwing something up there. You can run these during the show. It's fine. Grady hyped me up at the press conference. Let's go, man. The professor. I'm with you. Like, I love that kind of stuff. Like, again, winning the press conference and all that stuff notwithstanding, there is something to be said about a general feeling in this building, because people do say that. They say, nobody wants to play for that. That's always I know it's an internet thing, and people are just being haters on the social media platforms. But I think people do want to play for the Bears, and I think a big reason why is because of Ben Johnson. The history is nice, and it's nice for the fans and everything. And I love that players come in and acknowledge it. But at the same time, like, Ben Johnson is a huge part of that. Ben Johnson is a big reason why people want to come over here and play for the Bears. I do want to ask you, though, one player that we didn't, and I didn't get a chance to get your opinion on this, that we didn't get, and this was one of the things that we thought possibly could happen. Everybody was checking to see if their Khalil Mack jerseys still fit and all that stuff, and it was unfortunate. He goes back to the Chargers. I said initially that when that deal was happening, and I was out of the golf course. I don't know if you noticed that. I was out there at Meadowlark Golf Course talking to the fans and being like, like, I would have loved Khalil Mack to return, but 18 mil? That wasn't that. And it was all guaranteed. I'm like, I know we're here to celebrate what we were able to get done, but I'm like, it's not the end of the world that we missed out on that one for that price.
Well, I don't appreciate you telling me how you're on the golf course. I have a group text of my friends that I golf with regularly, and they're getting their first 18 holes in on Saturday, and I'm sitting over here with, a recently surgically repaired knee.
That's right.
And so now you guys are just piling it on.
It has been drizzling here, though, so it's not been perfect.
Oh, it's so poor Adam. It's been drizzling, and I've got 6 weeks before I can actually go out and hit a ball. But when I get out there, trust me, my guys are in trouble. They can get a head start on me all they want, but there's only one natural in the group, and that is me. And yes, I'm very humble about my golf game. But no, to your point, with Khalil Mack, I mean, of course, we were all disappointed. Not going to pretend otherwise. We all thought it felt like they were going to get Drew Dahlman and Khalil Mack the start of free agency, and then right before Twitter crashed, we were at least notified that we weren't getting Khalil Mack. So be it. I mean, it would have been a fun story. Obviously, I think they would have had to give him more than a 1-year deal if he came here, and I would have been fine with that. Yeah. But you're looking for a youth movement. So the one guy we haven't talked about here yet tonight on this program is Dio Odango, the defensive lineman who's played on the inside and the outside for the Indianapolis Colts. If you want to talk about what Dennis Allen is trying to execute, we talk so much about what Ben Johnson's trying to execute on offense. Well, Dennis Allen is known for having bigger defensive ends. He's going to want guys that hover around that 285-pound range or more. Well, Dio is 286 pounds and 6'6" something. He's a monster. He's huge. And we just had JJ Stankovitz on, and he's actually the PA voice of the Indianapolis Colts now, but he covered the Chicago Bears for a long time.
Yeah.
NBC Sports Chicago. Great dude.
He was on right when we hired, we had him on right when he hired Matt Eberflus, and he said Matt Eberflus was great, and so we'll never talk to JJ again.
Right. Yeah, well, nobody's perfect. We all have our wrong predictions at times. But at the same time, he did say, I think there's a good opportunity for Dio to have better results with the Bears than he did with the Colts. And he cited the lack of a secondary for Indianapolis, and they couldn't get to the quarterback as a defensive line unit simply because the secondary couldn't cover anybody. And so there's a lot of quick passing game going on. And so, 2 years ago, he did have 8 sacks. And I think overall, they paid him $16 million. So a couple million less than Khalil Mack. But when you look at some of the numbers being thrown around by different guys that are getting paid, obviously the best of the best are getting paid $30 million or plus.
Yeah.
And now you bring this guy in. I think he got, fair money for a solid player. It's not like they paid a bad player solid money. They didn't pay a solid player great money. And so if he ends up being exactly who he's been for Indianapolis, then I think they got a fair market value for him. If he ends up playing better than what he did for Indianapolis, then they got a really good deal here. The only way this isn't going to work out is if all of a sudden he becomes a bad player for the Bears when he's been a solid player for the Colts. So you come over to Chicago, starting to build out that defensive line. You got Montez Sweat, Andrew Billings, Jervon Dexter, Grady Jarrett. You're going to draft a defensive lineman, presumably in the first couple rounds, to add to that room. And so that gives him a chance to thrive. And again, thrive in a defense that's, from a trait standpoint, fits what Dennis Allen is looking for. So I understand why Bears fans are hesitant to feel good about that move. But at the same time, we have to trust the evaluation of our coaching staff that we have in here now that we're also excited about. Well, then they need the players in here to execute their vision.
Can we pull up Dr. Truth's statement here? Because Dr. Truth is saying, what scares me is that Odango's missed tackle percentage went up by 600% last year. His sacks went down with more defensive snaps. He was also playing defensive tackle. He was asked to do something different for the Indianapolis Colts last season, playing out of position, so to speak. And obviously, when you look at the numbers and the analytics on that part of it, that's true. But he was playing out of position, doing something to try to help the team win. Instead, now he comes to a team with a system that is going to be suited towards his strengths. Obviously, I think a guy like Leonard Floyd was never a great player for us, moves on and becomes a lot better. Now, obviously, part of that is playing alongside with Aaron Donald will make you a better player. But we're hopeful that here with some of the studs we've started to put together here in Chicago, that he's going to be able to go out there and step up. So I know that, some of those numbers look poor when you look at them in a vacuum. But I think when you add the context to it, it's going to be fine. And I think that the Bears got an ascending player for 3 years as opposed to paying more for a veteran that you hope can go back and play to the level that he once did.
Well, and on top of that, hey, man, we need guys to play like game wreckers. You want to win the championship? You want to win a Super Bowl? Well, at some point, guys on your defensive line have to become game wreckers. And they traded for Montez Sweat to be just that. And so last year probably wasn't up to his expectations. Now you try to get him some help, get him some veterans on the inside. That should help maybe open up some things, maybe get some double teams off of him. Whoever you draft to bring in here, they got to be a game wrecker. They got to be a game changer. And so, that's fine. You got solid guys across the board. You got Jervon Dexter trying to make another jump in his development. He had a really solid year last year. But they just brought in a defensive tackle to that room. Now they needed the depth. You need the rotation. But let's see Jervon Dexter take that challenge on. Let's see him follow Grady Jarrett's lead when he talks about, hey, I'm still hungry for greatness and I want to see who follows me. Well, follow him, Jervon, and everyone feed off of each other. When you referenced, those Lovie Smith Bears in that defensive line, they might not have had a psychopath on that defensive line, but you know what they did have? They had a bunch of game wreckers. Yeah. Tommy Harris, ask any player from that team before he was injured, they'll tell you he was the most talented player that they played with. And Alex Brown and Adewale Agunlea got to the quarterback. And then obviously the linebackers behind him with Lance Briggs, Brian Urlacher and Hunter Hillemeyer spoke for themselves. So, none of those guys were, psychos, but you know what they were? They were game wreckers. So the Bears, the more talent you put around each other, now it's time for somebody to shine through and start wrecking games and winning games.
No, I would agree with that wholeheartedly. All right. Sammy, one of the first comments here about Drew Dahlman. And so the wild man, wait, I'm not saying that correctly. Anyways, why was Dahlman not spoke of by Ben or Ryan and hasn't been announced by the media? Do you have any insight into that?
Yeah, I do. The reason being is, the guys that were announced today, their deals were officially done. And so the guys that couldn't speak today, the tight end that they brought in, Dio Odango, and then of course Drew Dahlman, their contracts or however logistics, because free agency technically just started at 3 p.m. I know it feels like free agency has been going on for 9 days now because Ryan Poles has been making a move every day for 2 weeks. But to me, that that's, the point of it is that they had to wait for 3 p.m. to officially sign some of these terms. Maybe some of them logistically have some different hurdles to overcome. And so tomorrow at 3 p.m., just like today, there will be media availability for those players as well.
Yeah, so we'll get some additional news. I wouldn't worry about it too much. Going to a Scottish Bear here, who wants to add some context to everything with Odango, as Marcus Davenport was quality with the Saints with Dennis Allen. He's been poorly since leaving the Saints. Dennis Allen has the habit of getting the best out of these big body type of guys. And honestly, that's exactly what everybody felt when Odango signed, was he is a perfect Dennis Allen type of player.
Yeah, I agree. So, I mean, that's what you're looking for, is Dennis Allen types of players. That's why I think when people bring up, who are they going to draft with that number 10 pick, if you're looking at defensive line, to me, Shamar Stewart from Texas A&M fits that bill. And I know a lot of fans are like, no, I don't want him. He didn't get production. Well, sometimes you got to look and find your way to who fits the style. And so, to your point, I mean, when you're looking at, style of play, that sometimes can lead you to who the Bears are going to pick up. I've been keyed in on a wide receiver that they could add here in the next few days, because I think that's the next move to be made for the Bears. Well, I think a lot of people stylistically or style of play or, previous history with, look at guys like Tim Patrick and Josh Reynolds, wide receivers that previous played with Ben Johnson in Detroit. So I think you're right on with it. Like follow the trail of style of play.
Oh man, if Tim Patrick comes and plays for the Bears, I would really love that. I thought he was a great player with the Denver Broncos, and of course suffers that injury, and then he had some moments with the Detroit Lions. I wouldn't mind Tim Patrick being a part of this group. Another guy who's or somebody wants to know is a possibility. CJ Mosley just got released. Any possibility they add him to solidify that LB core and the bare minimum expectations? What do you think about CJ Mosley? Do you think, again, it's hard to speculate. I know that people are just trying to read some tea leaves. I mean, it would make sense, but I'm not sure if the Bears are putting a priority on that position or not.
No, certainly not. And when you're looking at, I call them luxury picks because we have higher priority needs, in my opinion, on this roster. But linebacker, safety, running back, tight end, like those are some of the picks. Like, you can continue to add to those rooms or attempt to upgrade those rooms. And so I don't blame you for looking at that. You got to see where the market goes. Same with wide receiver. As much as they do need to fill that room out right now, they only have like 2-3 guys, if you include Tyler Scott as well, who deserves an opportunity.
Why would you not include Tyler Scott?
I would always include Tyler Scott, but he does deserve an opportunity. But this is now his third coaching staff, so I'm certainly rooting for him to have that opportunity. What a great story that would be for Tyler, who had 2 coaching staffs previously for whatever reason, not give him that opportunity. And if the mad scientist, the crazy professor here, Ben Johnson, finds within his genius how to get a guy with that kind of speed the ball in his hands, sounds good to me. So 3 guys in that wide receiver room, but they still have to add to that room. So through free agency or the draft. But then going back to your question about linebacker, it's just so low on their priority right now. They're not going to use much money to try to find an upgrade there. You're going to be trying to find guys literally off the street. So to me, safety is another option I think they need to look at, but I think that's something they have to look in the draft. Running back, another thing they need to look at, but again, something they look in the draft. So, that's kind of where I'm at when it comes to that.
I would say that if the Bears are going to do anything at linebacker, I think later on in the draft, if somebody like UCLA's Carson Schlesinger happen to fall in the draft, I think he could be somebody that the Bears look at. I don't know. He's a UCLA kid. He played at Moore Park, so I'm familiar with his game. And so, again, I don't know if Dennis Allen looks at him the same way that I do, but it's just somebody. When you're talking about wide receivers, so you were just going through the wide receivers, though. of those veteran guys, like Keenan Allen, I don't think he's coming back. But like Keenan Allen's out there, Amari Cooper, Cooper Kupp, Stephon Diggs. Are any of those guys fits for the Bears? I know you talked about Tim Patrick. Like Tim Patrick seems more realistic.
Right.
But do any of those big names seem realistic to you?
Right. And then the other big names like Brandon Cooks, I think could be added to that name.
Yeah, I love Brandon Cooks.
It's like, right, everybody's looking for speed. Everybody's
Yeah.
trying to find like who's going to be the Jameson Williams. And again, Tyler Scott deserves an opportunity to be the speed guy for the Bears.
There it is.
He has speed. He's currently on your roster. But if you're also looking to add to that room, and overall, I think Ben Johnson just values speed across the board for his offensive skill set guys. So you're looking at that, right? So I understand why people just immediately go to Tim Patrick and Josh Reynolds, and that very may well be who they get. Detroit has had a recipe of two solid wide receivers, very good wide receivers, and a guy like Tim Patrick as your third. But I'm not ruling out any of those veteran wide receivers that you just said, whether it be Cooper Kupp, Amari Cooper, even Keenan Allen, bringing him back. And the reason I say that is let's look at the wide receiver market and look at the names that have been signed here in the last few days. Most of them hover around a 1 year, $10 million deal. And that was the first wave of wide receivers. DeAndre Hopkins just went to the Ravens for a 1 year, $6 million deal. So what is the market going to be for this second tier, third tier wave of wide receivers still out there? And now with the options they have against the rest of the league, do you want to go to a team that has a bad quarterback situation or a bad play caller situation? You can come to Chicago and you got Ben Johnson, who's proven to get he had 70 touchdowns for the Detroit Lions. Obviously the Bears aren't the Detroit Lions yet, so don't get mad, Lions fans, if you see this clip, but the point stands. You could have an opportunity to come here on a 1 year deal, maybe 1 year, $5 million deal, and set yourself up for your next contract or maybe your last contract, depending on your age. So I understand, like a month ago was with everybody else. No consideration to Keenan Allen coming back. Let's let Rome Odunze, start to elevate as the guy in this town. You drafted him number 9. You get 700 yards receiving out of him. You need more production. Him and Caleb look to make a big jump in his second year. But I just think for me, I still don't mind bringing in that veteran presence because I know Ben Johnson will be able to get the most out of every asset he has on offense. And if Rome Odunze is ready to have a star-studded jump in his second year, then Ben Johnson's going to see it through. And Amon-Ra St. Brown is going to see that through. Last year's coaching staff didn't know what to do with DJ Moore, Keenan Allen, or Rome Odunze for that matter. DJ Moore didn't start having good games until Thomas Brown was calling plays. So I'm not afraid to bring in an Amari Cooper or a Brandon Cooks or a Keenan Allen and stabilize that room and leave yourself a margin of error. Just like when we talked about when the defensive tackle got hurt last year, Andrew Billings, everything fell off. Offensive line gets hurt last year. It was already bad. Everything fell off way worse. Get another guy in that room, because if Rome Odunze or DJ Moore get hurt, or Tyler Scott, who will continue to include in this conversation, it gets a lot tighter. Your depth chart gets harder to maneuver through. So why wouldn't you, if it's a reasonable deal, why wouldn't you want to have a guy that knows what he's doing in that room? It should never take away from what Rome Odunze's capabilities are. If he's as great as he is, there isn't a guy in that room that's going to take away from that happening.
I feel like this could be some sort of like Ocean's 11 thing where it's like, hey, let's go get Keenan Allen and Cooper Kupp, both on like $5 million deals, just to be like, yeah, let's go. Like, let's just make this amazing. I know it's not going to happen. I know that's the kind of stuff. I used to do this on Madden all the time, where you're like, hey, I just loaded up, with who are the guys back then? But it would be like Anthony Miller or whatever. Anthony Miller and somebody, like players like that. But
yeah, I thought you were going to have a much deeper pool, like old school pool.
Dude, Anthony Miller was good.
I know Anthony Miller was good, but you're talking about the 90s?
The 90s.
Well, Anthony Miller is from the 2018 Bears.
Anthony Miller, who played for the Broncos.
Oh, see, I don't even know who that is. So you did go deep cut.
That was That was so deep cut. Yes. Anthony Miller was a
Broncos.
Broncos receiver. Yeah.
I thought you were talking about Bears legend Anthony Miller.
No,
Played
no,
for the
no, no,
Ravens,
no.
in the playoffs.
Not that one. Not that one. No, I went even deeper. David Boston, Anthony Miller, Rob Moore, Herman Moore, like all these Herman Moore.
Well, and when you talk about wide receivers, speaking of the Moores, everybody's talking about Rondale Moore, who's available as an option.
Hey, that's not a bad.
I was big on Rondale Moore coming out of Purdue.
100%.
And I would have loved for the Bears to draft him. It didn't work out for him in Arizona. Bring him to Chicago. Let him be your, add to that speed in that wide receiver room. He's another guy that's on the table. So I believe the next move that Ryan Poles makes is for wide receiver.
Got to be some sort of wide receiver.
And the other reason too, and I'm sorry to add to this point, but this is my other point to it. Reason being, if this wide receiver draft class is thin, and where are you realistically going to draft a wide receiver? Probably they don't have a 4th round pick. You're not going to draft one likely in the first 3 rounds. So now you're talking about adding that room from the 5th round and beyond. There's a lot of variables that go into play there, that where you're going to add to that room to somebody that can actually make an impact on your roster this year. And so that's the other reason why I do think it's imminent.
Yeah, no, I got you. It's funny. I love reading. I'm going against my own advice and reading the comments and be like, yeah, nobody brags in a 90s reference. Like, there's a reason why I don't mention people like the Beastie Boys or whatever, because I know where the cutoff is.
Listen, Lucky Spag, I'm a 90s guy. I was born.
Are you?
Yes, I was born in 85. I live and breathe the 90s. Now, my basketball 90s references are going to be more up to snuff.
Yeah, because the Bears were good, or the Bulls were good.
Right. And my baseball 90s references are a little more there. But I think he pulled early 90s. If it's late 90s, then I'm on the same page. But I think that might have been Anthony Miller. That's an early 90s pull. It's got to be.
Got to be about mid 90s.
All right.
Because he played with Elway, if I'm not mistaken. I didn't go. Yeah, it's not like I was going.
You didn't say Curtis Conway and Jeff Graham. Now, if you had said them or Tommy Waddle,
I was talking about taking guys from other teams and putting them on the Bears.
Of course.
So that's where it'd be like Anthony Miller, David Boston. I remember David Boston a lot. Like, that was one, and when he came out of Ohio State. Actually, because he got paired because that Ohio State team beat the Sun Devils in the 96 Rose Bowl. And then, of course, he gets drafted, and Jake Plummer's got to throw the ball to David Boston. He's like, I don't care now. But in any event, I do want to close out, though, with this. Wait, we have 2? Oh, my God, look at all these things. I just want to know. We've been going over an hour because I gotta let Brad go, and I gotta go out and do some stuff. Let's go to Tim's comment, because I think this will be a good one to kind of end us off. Here, when will we know?
Call me Brad from San Fran. You said Brad.
What'd I say?
You said Brad from San
Fran. Oh my God, Brad from San Fran. Jesus. Well, you were the one who brought it up last night.
When I was in 3rd grade, there was a guy in my class. His name was Brad, and everybody calls me Braggs. So anytime the teacher would say Brad, I would like instinctively like get up for a second. So I even with the Brad from San Fran thing, and there's some people that have jokingly called me Brad, even before the San Fran thing. I do sometimes answer to Brad in a weird way.
That's right. I'm sorry. I fumbled. I was also up late. I was up early this morning because, again, the NFL Network wanted me to come in and be like, hey, can you come in and do 2 segments? And I'm like, I'm not even in LA. And they're like, okay. And then, by the way, this is great. So I'm like, hey, I'm not in LA. Can you guys just send me a Zoom link? They're like, okay. So then I pop up like this. Like, I thought you said you weren't in LA. And I'm like, I'm not. I'm in Huntington Beach. It's Orange County. It's completely different. Not Los Angeles. Like, you didn't, y'all, you just needed to ask one more question. Are you home? Yes. But my home is not in Los Angeles. It's in Orange County. Completely different place. Not really. You understand, being in Indiana. But let's go back to Tim Reinhardt's deal about when we know if the Ben Johnson era is as good as we hope it is. 2025 season, or will it take more time? We're there. It's done. We're good. We're already good, Tim. What more do you need to see? We're the 3-time. Listen, the Kansas City Chiefs failed in their three-peat. The Chicago Bears did not. won our third consecutive offseason championship, which I think is admirable. But what do you think? You're talking to the two meatballs here. Where's Carmen Vitale? She'll tell us 2028 is when we can be excited about this team.
Right. No wet blankets of Mark Carman or Adam Hogue to put a damper on our excitement for the year. That being said, I did, and I, I've said this on this show here to end the year. Like I did kind of make a promise to myself that I was going to be a little more level this offseason. And there's a lot of prove it I want to see from this team. And so, like, we were talking on CHGO Bears here last week. They're like, well, we got the leadership is they fixed that. And the culture is fixed. Because now look at Grady Jarrett. Look at Joe Tooney. Look at it's fixed. No, it's not fixed yet. They've got the right pieces, and now it has to be executed. They've got the coaching staff looks right. The personnel looks right. Everything looks right. But now they actually have to go and earn that. They have to earn that checked box. And so for me, I'm not there yet. I want them to show it. I want them to show it throughout the summer. I want them to show it at training camp and then come out week 1 and show this team that you're now playing with a different attitude and a different approach and a different preparation. No more penalties. No more talking all week long. Play together, play tough, play physical. Those are all like narratives, cliche things, but they're cliche for a reason. And this team lost their way last year. And halfway through last year, they let go of the rope. This coaching staff certainly did nothing right by them, but there's still pride on the line. And I didn't see a lot of pride from these guys to end the year. And that's disappointing because I know they have it within them, but I'm just calling it for how I saw it. And I hope that these guys can come together and play a lot tougher than they did in 2024, now in 2025.
No, I agree with that. And like Kyle Long has said, and I know that you also agree with this, it's time to stop telling us. It's time to start showing us. So as much as we're excited, but believe me, I'm still picking us to win 12 games. Don't worry about that. But I need to see it too. Because it's one of those things, like we've seen coordinators come in here before and be like, hey, we're going to turn it around. We've changed the culture. We brought in this guy. We got to go out there. I do believe, to answer Tim's question, that you can kind of see that stuff as Greg is talking about here, that if we're taking dumb penalties and just doing idiotic things, that's going to be a red flag. But if we go out and it might not be measured in wins and losses, but if like they're playing hard, they're not beating themselves, the offense looks good, some things are happening, you're like, like you can tell the difference between like a team that's got its poop together and one that doesn't. And I hope that the Bears are going to be one of those teams. And I think we'll be able to see it in training camp, hopefully see it in some of the preseason games. But there's still a long ways to go because we still have a draft to go with. And why don't we throw up James's quote real quick here? James, do you think Ben Johnson believes the Bears will ever pick this high again? Take a damn blue chip immediate starter this year. James, I love the enthusiasm, but we are building we need to build for the future. Let's bring up the last one too. Let's make sure Nino knows Braxton Jones' injury looked really bad in the last game versus what is the word out of his recovery?
Well, I'm not exactly sure where his recovery is exactly, but Ryan Poles and Ben Johnson spoke about Braxton Jones today, and he said the quote was, "We feel good about Darnell Wright and Braxton Jones." So, if you compare that to what Ryan Poles said to end the press conference at the Combine, where he said, well, we'll see how Braxton Jones comes out from the other side of his injury. That certainly felt more like a challenge, Yeah. So still, I think that still has to be played out. And I don't think we'll know for sure until we get to the summer, see when he's actually available to come back. And let's see where the Bears draft. If they draft a tackle prospect in the first or second round, I think regardless of whether it's a first round pick or a second round pick, I think Braxton is going to have a little bit of competition there potentially. And hopefully he embraces that competition and wins the job. He, as much as we talk about, or I talk about replacing Braxton Jones, he is well within his rights to come back from his injury, play great here in the preseason, get acclimated to that offensive line room, have a great year with Ben Johnson and a veteran O-line around him. He's never had any of that. So I think that it's fair to say he deserves that opportunity to show the kind of player he is around a healthier environment. That's completely fair. But it's also fair to say, may the best man win, and we're going to create competition at as many positions as we possibly can. And if you're good enough, you will embrace that competition as well. And as Jason says in chat, Karan Amagaji will be his competition. He's also well within his right to get in the fight here. So I can put a cap and a projection on whoever I think is going to do what. But at the end of the day, these guys are the ones that have the final say and all that. And I'm rooting for every single one of them because ultimately I don't really care who's doing what. I just want the Bears to win games and get to the playoffs and win a Super Bowl for once in my life.
I don't care who it is as long as it's somebody. Well, the Bears have done a great job this week. And of course, we're going to continue to cover it here on the Sick Podcast with Adam Rank. And of course, on Friday, I will be joining our friends on CHGO, hopefully talking about maybe an extra move or two or some other clarity on some of these issues that we were talking about here tonight. So I want to thank everybody for being here. The Tape Never Lies Network will be coming up here shortly, or if you're going to bounce over to go see AEW or The Challenge, don't spoil it for me because I got to go take my girls to training. In any event, thanks everybody for being here. Greg, thank you once again for joining us. I know it was a busy day over at CHGO, so we appreciate it. I will see you guys on Friday. So until that time, bear down. And Sammy, go ahead and play us out.
And that's a wrap. Hope you don't miss us too much until next time. Follow the Sick Podcast with Adam Rank on YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, Google Play, and Apple Podcasts.